Pastor Carrie. Welcome to Sunday School. We are on chapter 20 of the story, the Queen of Beauty and Courage. What if you don't say anything at this time? Then help for the Jews will come from another place, and you and your family could die. Who knows? It's possible that you became queen for a time just like this. And that's from Esther chapter 4, verse 14. Time passed and a new king conquered Babylon. King Xerxes became the ruler of the Persian Empire. The Jewish people who lived in many countries and cities of the empire had to obey their new king. King Xerxes wanted everyone to do as he said. His closest friend, Haman, always followed the king's orders. But the king's wife, Queen Vashti, didn't do what the king asked, so King Xerxes got rid of her. Now he needed to find a new queen. Esther saves her people. The search was on for a new queen for King Xerxes of Persia. All the pretty young women were ordered to come to his palace. Esther didn't want to go, but she had no choice. Her cousin Mordecai warned her, "Don't tell anyone you're a Jew. You might be harmed if they find out." Beautiful Esther obeyed. When she was presented to the king, he fell madly in love. King Xerxes quickly made Esther his queen. But Haman, the king's right-hand man, was growing more powerful. He convinced the king to sign a law that made all the people bow down to Haman. Haman really loved that rule. Everywhere he went, people knelt down to honor him. But one day, Mordecai did not bow down to Haman. Mordecai believed it was wrong to show honor to anyone but God. This made Haman very angry. He knew that Mordecai was a Jew, so he convinced King Xerxes to kill all the Jews. When Mordecai learned of the plan, he ran to Esther. "You must talk the king into changing his plan." Esther wasn't sure she could find the courage to argue against powerful Haman. And what would the king do when he learned she was a Jew? Would she be in danger? Then Mordecai spoke from his heart. "God may have planned your life just for this moment. You may be the only hope for your people." Esther knew what she had to do. She invited the king and Haman to a special banquet. King Xerxes was so pleased, he asked her, "What do you want, Queen Esther? I'll do anything you ask." Esther said, "I want you to save my life." The king didn't understand, but said, of course I will save your life." Then Esther explained Haman's plot to kill the nation of Jews. Angry at Haman's sly trick, the king ordered Haman killed. The queen had found her courage, and God's people were saved. If we look at our story card for today, of course, our main character is Queen Esther. And our main verse, our key verse, is from the book of Esther, chapter 4, verse 14. "It's possible that you became a queen for a time just like this." It's possible that you became queen for a time just like this. Queen Esther used the power she had as queen, the voice she had as queen, the influence she had as queen, and she used that crown, that power, to serve other people, to save the Jewish people, her nation, the nation she was a part of. She used all that she had been given, everything that she had been given as queen, she used to serve other people. That's an exciting story. This is another one of those hard stories. We have lots of hard stories in the Old Testament, and I want us to remember, we used the analogy of the metaphor, the the story of a farmer. If a farmer comes across a field, sometimes if that field hasn't been worked before, hasn't been planted, it's hard. It might be full of rocks and the soil hasn't been tilled up. It hasn't been worked. It hasn't been planted. And that soil can be really hard. And the farmer knows if seed's going to grow in there, that soil has to be worked. And that's really what so much of the Old Testament stories, the ones we've been reading, these hard stories, like the story of Esther, that's really what they're doing. Human hearts are hard, aren't they? Our hearts tend to be hard. That's not what we were created for. We were created for soft hearts that fully cooperated with God. But because we've so often chosen to do things our way instead of God's way, human hearts get hard. And so we need these hard stories. These hard stories are like that farmer who goes out and works that soil, tills it up, turns it over, gets rid of all the stones, gets it ready for the good seed. And we know that that seed is coming, isn't it? The seed is Jesus. That's the seed that will be planted in the soil of our lives. And the Old Testament, these hard stories are because we have hard hearts, and they get us ready for the good news of Jesus. So let's be asking ourselves the ancient questions. We're looking and asking for the ancient paths, those paths that the people who have gone before us, the saints who have gone before us, have walked. And we know they asked themselves some version of these two questions. Who is God? Who is God, and what is God asking me to do? So in the story of Queen Esther, who is God? God has perfect timing. God has perfect timing. The Jewish people needed a queen. They needed someone who was brave, someone who was courageous, someone who had influence, someone who had a voice that the king would hear. Queen Esther was that person, was that woman, that follower of God who was ready at that perfect time. So God has perfect timing, and that's a comfort, isn't it? Because we're often looking at our watches, aren't we? Or looking at the clock. And we have our timing. We have an idea of when we think things should happen, or when God should do something, or when we should do something. But we're not always on the mark. We're sometimes too fast or too slow. But God's timing is perfect. There was a need in this story. The Jewish people had a need, and Queen Esther was there at the perfect time. That was all God's doing, God's plan. Who is God? God has perfect timing. And now what does God ask of us? Well, as we're waiting for God's perfect timing, as we're practicing being patient, that is a perfect opportunity for our character to grow. Right, our character is doing things God's way, not our way, even when no one's watching, even when we're not the center of the story. And so in that time before Esther became queen and her bravery, her courage saved her people, she was waiting. She was waiting, and we know by the end of the story that her character was growing. Her character was developing. Her character was deepening. Even when no one was watching, she was choosing to do things God's way and not her way. And that way, when it was God's perfect timing, she was ready. She was ready to be brave in that moment. And you know what, friends? It's no different for us. God's timing is still perfect, and God is still asking us to wait patiently. And in that waiting time, that our character would grow as we cooperate more and more with God's love. Our character gets deeper and deeper. It gets stronger and braver. And we are ready when God says, "You're on, it's your time." We'll be ready to be brave and courageous like Queen Esther. All right, friends, lots to think about this week. I invite you as little churches to be thinking about your character, thinking about the choices and the decisions and the thinking that happens while we're waiting on God's perfect timing. And I am praying that you are brave. I know you have been brave and courageous like Queen Esther, and I am praying that you continue to be brave and courageous. You are loved. You are prayed for. Jump into chapter 21, and we'll be together again next week. Bye-bye.